All right, so we are here for round number 2. I successfully survived module 1, but I had to go and sleep since I did have a long day. So this would not be like the real test. Obviously, I'd be going through the whole thing in one sitting, but let's move on to module 2, reading and writing. 33 more questions. Okay, so let's see if this is the easier or the harder module. So number 1, we have Jacob Lawrence being blank was an important part. We don't know what yet. Because he paid close attention. Okay, paid close attention. That might be the adjective. Observant, maybe. Yeah, he captured nuances in the beauty and vitality. Yeah, skeptical means you don't believe or aren't willing to believe readily. Critical means you have a negative opinion or you don't like to accept things as they are. Confident doesn't quite work either. That one's pretty straightforward. Okay, and then we have this person, Monica Lopez and others at Brazil's Butantan Institute are studying freshwater stingrays. Okay, to determine whether biological characteristics such as the ray's age and sex have a significant would be my guess. Substantial means significant, right? Versus imperceptible means hard to tell, like very, very subtle. That is to see if differences are associated or attributed to. They might use the attributed. I think we saw that in attributable. I think we saw that in the last section. Let's get rid of that thingy. Okay, have a substantial, significant. Acceptable is like, it's not a sciencey word, right? Acceptable is more like a value judgment. And disconcerting means it's like concerning or makes you awkward or anxious or something. Okay. Researchers have struggled to pinpoint specific causes for hiccups, which happens when a person's diaphragm contracts involuntarily, because I know that. I get hiccups when I eat. Okay. Yeah, this one was easy. I could figure that out without thinking about it. Critics have asserted that fine art and fashion rarely blank in a world where artists create timeless works for exhibition. So timeless works for exhibition, and designers periodically produce new styles, so they rarely collide or convene. Oh, I see. Intersect is already my keyword that kind of says that, because we have two contrasting ideals here. So let's see what this example does. Luceño, blah, 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 and designer, blah, 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 challenges her view. Her work can be seen in the Metropolitan Museum of Art and purchased through our online boutique. So it's intersecting or convening here, right? And it says rarely, so you have a negative word in front of it. So it rarely convenes, it rarely intersects. And then this is the opposite. Diverge means to split. Succumb means to fall to. Prevail means to win over something. So none of those work there. Number 5. Scholarly discussions of gender often celebrate the rebellion of the playwright's characters against rigid expectations prescribed. Yeah, I saw the word prescribed. I kind of cheated, but like set upon, right? They challenge the rigid expectations laid upon them by the Elizabethan society. Most of the comedies end in marriage, with characters returning to their socially dictated gender roles after previously defying them, but there are some notable expectations. I feel like there should be a but there, right? Yeah, so you don't... The expectations are prescribed to... I'm trying to think of other words that's saying... Interjected means to, like, interrupt a sentence, to say, like, help, or, like, yes. And expectations aren't committed by society. They're not illustrated by society too. I think this is just one of those things where that's just a word you have to know. Prescribed isn't just for medication. Prescribed also is like this idea of like something that's written before it's even happened, right? It's just something that's been inherently written into society standards. These are all SAT words. So let's go backwards then and define them before we go into what this question is asking. Deceptive means to like deceive, right? To like trick. Innocuous, this was one of my SAT words when I was studying for it. Innocuous, not harmful. So I think it comes from the word maybe noxious. I'm making this up, so if somebody knows, please correct me in the comments below. But something is noxious is like foul or harmful chemically or smelling wise. So if something's innocuous, it's not harmful, like a benign tumor. Novel doesn't just mean the book. Novel has the Latin word root nov, which means new. So novel is synonymous with new. And then impractical, something that's not practical, right? Something that's hard to do or maybe expensive or it takes a lot of time or something. So let's see what's going on here. So we have this use of stimuli to reduce the itching sensation. Oh God, I hate histamines, right? It's allergy season right now. Lewis Ward and colleagues found that while harmless applications of vibration or warming can provide a temporary distraction, such blank, I don't know if it's impractical, actually offer less relief than a stimulus that seems less benign. Ah, okay, less benign, like a mild electric shock. Harmless. Oh, we have the word harmless here too. So it's innocuous. Oh, there's your SAT word. So it looks like they're starting to directly test vocab more than they did in the past, maybe. IDK. The province of, I'm not going to try, was situated on the Pacific coast, hundreds of kilometers southeast of Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire. Because Blank's location within the empire was so blank, cacao and other trade goods produced there could only reach the capital only after a long overland journey. So I'm thinking it's like very remote, very hard to get to. So unobtrusive means it doesn't like stick out. So that kind of works. But I think concealed is better. Yeah, concealed is better. Because it was so concealed, yeah, hard to get to, right? Approximate is better for numbers, right, or estimates. Peripheral. Oh, peripheral means on the outskirts too. Oh, okay, so this is maybe an example of the SAT doing something where they give you a word that a lot of people know, right? It's so hidden. But hidden could be like right there in the center. So it's so peripheral, it's so hard to get to, it's so far away. Ah, so this is an example of the SAT also front loading too, right? They put two words here that seem like really reasonable, but then D makes a lot more sense, especially if we're thinking of a long journey. The following text is from Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. Jane is a governess. Governess is a fancy word for babysitter. So let's see. I went on my day's business tranquilly, but ever and anon. So anon means like suddenly or now. So it's like constantly vague suggestions kept wandering across my brain of reasons why I should quit Thornfield. And I kept involuntarily framing advertisements, I'm going to be British now, advertisements and pondering conjectures, these are guesses, about new situations. So she's like daydreaming about new things. These thoughts I did not think to check. They might germinate and bear fruit if they could. Oh, germinate, they're ready to sprout. So she's like really thinking about next steps and is like ready to move on maybe? So what choice best states the main purpose? To convey a contrast between her outward calmness. Okay, there is an outward calmness, so I see tranquilly, that kind of matches with that. And then internal restlessness, I see that too, right? She's involuntarily framing advertisements. Framing means thinking here. So A totally could work. Well, there's nothing about loyalty because she's thinking about leaving. To demonstrate that Jane finds her situation both challenging and deeply, oh, there you go. We have this SAT trigger word that's for bad answers. There's nothing that says she was deeply fulfilled at all. We don't like extremes, do we? And then to describe Jane's determination, she's not determined. In fact, it might be the opposite, right? She's wishy-washy. She's wandering and she's wondering maybe, and she's involuntarily thinking about. So don't see the determination there. I think A works best. Okay. Oh, double text. This is new. Okay. So this is one that I might try to annotate, maybe? You know, annotation can be your friend. Most animals regenerate their skin, some body parts, but when a 3-banded panther worm is cut into 3 pieces, each piece grows in a new worm. That's very frightening. So you have a worm here, worm here, worm here, and then they're each into new worms. Researchers are investigating this feat partly to learn more about humans' comparatively limited abilities to regenerate, and they're making exciting progress. And especially promising discovery is that both humans and panther worms have a gene for early growth response linked to regeneration. What is this saying? Are they saying that humans might be able to regenerate limbs? That'd be fascinating, huh? Okay, and then we have text 2. When they found this gene, it caused excitement. However, okay, there's got to be a but, right? The team pointed out the gene likely functions very differently in humans than it does in panther worms. That makes sense, right? Because otherwise we'd be growing like fingers and toes all over the place. So EGR is like a switch that activates other genes involved in regeneration in panther worms, but how this switch operates in humans remains unclear. I see. So we have the first one, right? And I would say the second one kind of elaborates or expands upon it. So text 2 expresses reservations. It is reasonable. No, they wouldn't say it's reasonable, right? Because it starts off with but, right? It kind of summarizes it and then says but. I think it's overly optimistic. I agree with that. It is unexpected. Wait, Srivastava was not generally met with enthusiasm. It was met with reservations. And then unfairly dismissive. Oh, again, I don't like the word unfairly here. The first one was, well, and it wasn't dismissive either, right? It said it was exciting. So this one, you got to pay attention to who's saying what, right? The author of passage 2 would say that passage 1 is just too positive because it provides some concessions or counters. Okay, so that one's B. William Shakespeare, wow, I haven't seen him on the SAT. I've seen him on the Lit, not on the SAT Lit that was canceled in like 2020, I think. Sonnet 27, the poem is addressed to a close friend as if he were physically present. Weary with toil, I hurry to my bed, to dear repose. Repose is like sleep for limbs and travel tired. But then begins a journey in my head to my work when my body's works expired. So after I'm done working physically, my brain starts imagining things. For then my thoughts from far where I abide begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee. So my thoughts start traveling to you and keep my drooping eyelids open wide. So it's like when you go to sleep, but then you can't stop thinking of that person. Oh no, somebody's in love, right? Is not asleep. My eyelids are open wide, so it's not A. Not planning either, right? He's daydreaming or night dreaming, I guess, at this point. Too fatigued. No, that's too literal, right? He's weary. Of course he's too weary, but then the speaker's thinking about the friend instead of immediately falling asleep. Yeah, that one's D. So be careful of these two things, right? He's too fatigued to continue a discussion. There's not even a discussion going on, right? So make sure that your answers are 100% correct. They all sound kind of right, but they have some words that like throw it off. Making good time here. Okay, so then we have Lewis Carroll, person who wrote Alice in Wonderland. So this is a satirical novel. A crowd is gathered outside a room belonging to the warden. An official who reports to Lord Chancellor. One man who is more excited than the rest flung his hat high into the air and shouted as well as I can make out, "Who roar for the subwarden?" Everybody roared, but whether it was for the subwarden or not did not clearly appear. Some were shouting bread and some taxes. There's your satire, right? I'm thinking of Steve Carell when he's like, "I love lamp," and he's just shouting for no reason. But no one seemed to know what they really wanted. There you go. All this I saw from the open window of the warden's breakfast saloon, looking across the shoulder of the Lord Chancellor. What can it all mean? He kept repeating to himself. I'm guessing that's the Chancellor, maybe, and I never heard such shouting before. and at the time in the morning too, and with such unanimity. So the chancellor, I'm guessing, is imagining that everybody's in agreement, right? Unanimity, but it's clear from this paragraph over here that they're not all in agreement. So how does the Lord Chancellor respond? He asks about the meaning. He does kind of asks about the meaning, even though he doesn't claim to know what they want, though, so I feel like this makes it wrong. He indicates a desire to speak to the crowd. No, he doesn't claim that. He expresses sympathy for the crowd's demands. No. And then there's nothing that says annoyed, right? This is still going to be an evidence-based reading test. Don't assume annoyance, because you don't see like, oh, he looked sad or frustrated or something like that. He describes the crowd as being united, so that's the word unanimity, right? United, even though the crowd clearly appears otherwise. Let's see, is there something the crowd clearly appears otherwise? What can it all mean? He kept repeating to himself. Even though the crowd appears... Oh, clearly appears otherwise. The crowd clearly appears not united, right? So, but whether it was for the subordinate or not, did not clearly appear, right? So it was not clearly united. Did not clearly appear. It was muddled from that line. So I found some evidence showing that it was D, right? Do not make assumptions about mood or feelings or personality, right? We don't know that he has a desire. We don't know that he's annoyed. So please pay attention to that as you're going through these literary passages. Okay, so we have Willa Cather. She portrays Alexandra Bergson as having a deep emotional connection to her surroundings, her natural surroundings. Okay, so something deep and natural and emotional. Let's see. So I see nature here. She had never known before. Okay, so now she knows then, right? She'd never known before. We have the chirping of the insect. She felt as if her heart were hiding down there. Okay, heart is emotion. With the quail. Under the long shag, she felt the future stirring. Stirring is like waking up maybe, and maybe it's for her emotions. So I see that one totally works. B, she talked to the men about her crops and the women about poetry. So that's kind of a fact. She spent the whole day with one young farmer who'd been away at school. She learned a great deal. So nothing about emotions there. Alexandra drove off alone. The rattle of her wagon was lost in the howling of the wind, but her lantern held firmly between her feet made a moving point of light along the highway, going deeper and deeper into the dark country. Again, this is very factual, right? And it looks like we're trying to find something emotional. So let's see, D, it was Alexandra who read the papers and followed the markets and who learned by the mistakes of her neighbors. It was Alexandra who could always tell what it had cost to fatten each steer and who could guess the weight of a hog. This is showing like knowledgeable, right? She pays attention. Yeah, okay. I think this one's pretty clearly A, right? We see nature and we see emotions. So I think as you're going through this test, maybe it makes sense for you to like underline keywords or draw lines and arrows that connect the answers to the passage. That's something that I do on the current test itself, right? And it seems to be relevant for this test too. Okay, so here we have rate of speech. I heard that Spanish is a very fast language. Yes, Spanish, and then I think Japanese is one of the fastest languages in the world too. So there you go. This graph is showing that. So then we have researchers just determining how many syllables are spoken and how much information they can effectively convey. Oh, interesting. So it looks like Vietnamese, you can convey more information with fewer syllables. Interesting. Oh, I think this is because I know Spanish. Spanish has those really long verbs, right? You could have multiple syllables just for one verb. Let's see. So they found that although languages vary widely in the speed at which they're spoken, the amount of information can effectively convey tends to vary much less. Yeah, I see that this varies more, this varies a little bit less. Which choice best describes data from the table that supports the claim? So we're trying to show less variation, right? Variation means up and down all over the place. Thus they claim that two languages with very different spoken rates can nonetheless convey the same amount of information in a given amount of time. Okay, so then not this one then. Yeah, this one, right? Vietnamese conveys information at approximately the same rate as Spanish, right? Convey the same amount of information, conveys the same amount. And I pointed that out, right? Vietnamese and Spanish, yes. Okay, and let's just check these. The language that is spoken the fastest. No, this is saying that the faster you speak, the more information conveyed. That's also not true. That Serbian conveys information faster than Spanish does. That's not even true either, right? Serbian is not faster than Spanish, so some of these are just wrong. C and D are wrong if you look at the graph. So be careful of that too. So make sure that the information that they're telling you is correct in the table. Okay, so now we have these psychologists. A sensation of reverence and wonder. That's why things are awesome, right? You're amazed or in wonderment. Can enable us to feel more connected to others and thereby inspiring us to act more altruistically. Altruistically is with generosity, right? Keltner, along with blah, 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 came to have found evidence for this effect in a recent study where participants were asked to either gaze up at exceptionally tall trees in a nearby grove. Yeah, I would say that looking at tall trees has been awe-inspiring for me too. Yeah, I agree with that. Or stare at the exterior of a nearby nondescript building. Okay, yeah, that's not awe-inspiring. Boring buildings make me bored. After 1 minute, an experimenter deliberately spilled a box of pens nearby. So my guess is that somebody who was looking at the trees would be more likely to help them pick up their pens, right? They're acting more altruistically. Let's see if something matches that. Yeah, participants who'd been looking at the trees helped the experiment pick up significantly more pens. Yeah, I think this would be true. Let's just check the other ones to be safe. Participants who helped the experimenter pick up pens used a greater number of positive words to describe the trees. And the participants who, in a post-experiment survey, then did participants who did not help the experiment. That's not altruism, though. That's just positivity overall. So, okay, I think this is the SAT, right? They're trying to get you to understand the word altruism. Participants who did not help the experimenter pick up the pens were significantly more likely to... No, this is the inverse of what they're saying, right? And it's not regardless. Regardless, we're trying to show relationship there. Participants who had been looking at the building were significantly more likely to notice that the experimenter had dropped the pens. No, this is just paying attention. No, we're looking for altruism, so that one would be A. Another graph. Okay, rows may not add up to 100 due to rounding. That's good to know. So then it's telling us that the rows... Okay, so these are the rows should add up to 100. Okay, so this is France and this is US, so these 3 columns should add up to 100. Okay. So then over the past 200 years, blah, 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 it's saying they were dividing, has risen. However, this transition can happen at very different rates in 2 countries. This can be clearly seen by comparing the employment sector in both countries in... Okay, so they're trying to say that the percentage of population employed in the agricultural sector has declined, while employment has risen. So decline, decline, decline. Employment, I guess employment would be this one then, right? Or maybe these 2 overall. Decline, decline, decline. Where's the employment sector? Oh, employment in the service sector. I was so confused. I missed that word, service. So that's why I was like, what are we looking at? So service has risen the most here and here, yeah. So the biggest difference would probably be 1950 in both countries. In 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950, 1950 1900 with 1950. That's a small one. Yeah, small. 1800 with 2012. I mean, that'd be huge. That'd be the biggest one, right? 1900 over the past 200 years. Oh, different rates though. We're trying to show different rates in the two countries. So let's see if 1950 is a different rate. Yeah, 28 to 35. Yeah. Okay, this is the most different rate. Again, pay attention to the questions. So, okay, so then if we were trying to show different rates, right, this would be not right because we're showing the grand scheme over time, and over time it was roughly the same, right? Over time, 1900 was also roughly the same, yeah. So 1900 to 2012, 1800 to 1900, 64 to 14 to 35. If you look at these ones are still kind of similar. 13 to 53. Okay, and then what is this? 7 versus 20. So this is, I'm just going to write it out. 7 versus 20. And then what is this difference here? This is 9 versus, what is this difference here? Like 27? Okay. So this is like triple. There's a triple difference. So let's look at 1800 versus 1900 then. 64 to 32. So 32, 64 to 32. Oh, 18 to 1900. Sorry. That makes it a lot more straightforward. I was doing 1800 to 1950 because that was kind of a big difference. But 1800 and 1900 is roughly similar then. It's just these two apart, right? Yeah, way too similar. So A would be the best one. Many archaeologists will tell you that categorizing excavated fragments of pottery by style, period, and what objects they belong to relies not only on standard criteria, but also on instinct developed over years of practice. In a recent study, however, researchers trained a deep learning computer model on thousands of images of pottery fragments and found that it could categorize them as accurately as a team of expert archaeologists. Okay, that's scary. Deep learning, machine learning. Okay, some archaeologists have expressed concerns that they might be replaced by such computer models, but the researchers claim that that outcome is highly unlikely. Okay, so we want to show that we are not going to be taken over by machines. So we want to show that the experts are better. A is showing that the model was better, right? So not that one. And this is saying neither, no. So we want to show that archaeologists are better. Oh, interesting. A survey of archaeologists showed that categorizing pottery fragments limits the amount of time they can dedicate to other important stuff. Yeah, so then that only human experts can do, right? So yeah, it frees up time to do other stuff. A survey of archaeologists showed that few of them received dedicated training in how to properly categorize pottery fragments. No, that distracts, right? That makes the machine sound better. But the machines do the busy work, right? And the humans do the human expert work. Okay, next one. Although military vets make up a small proportion of the total population, they occupy a significantly higher proportion of the jobs in the civilian government. Interesting, did not know that. One possible explanation for this disproportionate representation is military services familiarizes people with certain organizational structures that are also reflected in the civilian government bureaucracy. So basically in the military there's all these levels, right? You have like, I don't know, cadet and lieutenant and sergeant, whatever, major. And I think knowing that there's this kind of like order, they call it a hierarchy, is also true in the US government too, where you kind of have a boss and your boss has a boss and your boss has a boss has a boss. So we want to show that making civilian government jobs especially appealing. Okay, yeah, maybe, yeah, they're familiar, so that they're really appealing. Alters the relationship. Well, that doesn't support this, right? We're trying to support that they get hired at a higher rate. Encourages non-veterans? No, we're trying to show why veterans take or government jobs. Increases the number of civilian government jobs that require some Well, that's not even related, right? They increase the number of civilian government jobs that require some amount of military experience. No. I would either say it'd be A, or maybe something else that, like, maybe those organizations tend to hire military vets more often because they are familiar with those structures, right? But this is just basically saying that more vets tend to apply to government jobs because they're more similar. But I think there are lots of other reasons besides that one. Another logically completes the text. Interesting. So lots of logic on this new SAT. Birds of many species ingest foods containing carotenoids, pigmented molecules that are converted into feather coloration. Interesting. Coloration tends to be especially saturated in male birds' feathers. And because carotenoids also offer health benefits, confer health benefits, the deeply saturated colors generally serve to communicate what is known as an honest signal of a bird's overall fitness to potential mates. That makes sense. I'm sure you've heard of, or if not, I'm telling you this for the first time, that the more colorful birds tend to be seen as more sexually healthy. So the females like to be with the more colorful male birds. However, this person and others have found that males in several species of whatever this is use microstructures in their feathers to manipulate light, creating an appearance of deeper saturation without the birds necessarily having to maintain carotenoid-rich diet. Huh. It's interesting. So it looks like this bird is maybe using makeup, their version of makeup, to make themselves seem more appealing. No, it's not honest, right? Is makeup considered honest? Let me know in the comments below. These findings suggest that feather microstructures may be less effective. No, it's not trying to show that they're less effective, right? They're saying that they use these light to their advantage. No, that's not even related to this thing. A male tanager's appearance may function as a dishonest signal. Yeah, so carotenoids are healthy, right? So it'd be like if you ate like carrots and then you turned orange, not only because you're healthy, but then because you you turn orange. That means that shows that you're healthy, but that shows you're also good for reproduction, right? But then instead, you don't eat carrots, so then you're weak and feeble, and then you just paint your face orange to like attract all the girls or something. So yeah, it would be a dishonest signal. Okay, 19, we have subject-verb agreement, right? I see were, past tense, have been and has been, which are present perfect tense, and we have are, which is present tense. So let's see which one it is. So when writing this novel, blah, 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 drew on our own experiences. This award-winning book is Harris's first novel, but her writing has been, right? It could have been her writing was honored before too, but there was no was, right? This is a singular subject. So we're just going to use the singular noun verb. Singular subject, singular verb, excuse me. Okay, so do we need a but here? The Alvarez theory, developed by blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So we have a positive here. We don't even need that. The Alvarez theory maintains, so this is like claimed or argued, that the secondary effects of an asteroid impact cause many dinosaurs and other animals to die out. Okay, so I think it should be comma then, right? Because that seems like a complete sentence. To die out. Let's check the second half. It left unexplored the question of whether unrelated volcanic activity might have also contributed to the mass extinctions. So here you have your subject, right? Your subject is it, and your verb is left. And then this is your object. It's a very long object. It left unexplored. Sorry, this is an adjective. And this is the object, right? So we have two independent clauses, which you need a comma and conjunction to connect. I'm just checking to see if there's a subordinating conjunction. No, there isn't. Okay. In winter, the diets of blah 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 snow monkeys are influenced more by food availability than by food preference. Although the monkeys prefer to eat vegetation and land-dwelling invertebrates. Ugh, that sounds like they like to eat worms or something. Those food sources may become available because of the extensive snow and ice cover. Forcing. I think it's forcing, right? Forcing the monkeys. Okay. Because we have we have the dependent clause here. Although the monkeys prefer to eat vegetation, those food sources may become available. So you have an independent clause here. So this right there is an independent clause. We already have a dependent clause, so we can't tack in another one. The only other options, dependent, DEP, is to do a comma conjunction, which we don't have, or we use a participial phrase, which is what C is. 22, okay, testing the question marks. They like to test question marks on the SAT. So we have somebody observe that alkaline soils contain an insoluble form of iron that blueberry plants cannot absorb, thus inhibiting, here we have another participial phrase, right? Thus inhibiting blueberry growth. If these plants were grown in alkaline soil alongside grasses that aid in iron solubilization, the blueberries could thrive. Could the blueberries thrive? He was determined to find out. I've never seen the question mark be the correct one, but I guess this is the first time, right? He was determined to find out. If you're gonna say this one, right? It's either gonna be B or D, but then B is definitive, right? The blueberries could thrive. So yeah, you needed to be a question. Wow, SAT mixing it up for the new version of the test. Okay. So we have this Korean American artist showed how television images could be manipulated to express an artist's perspective. Today, Peck is considered today, right? We're switching tense. So that's the trick here. Because a lot of people would probably say J, right? Because everything back then is in past tense, right? Showed. But we have a signifier indicating a shift in tense. Okay, the first computerized spreadsheet. Dan Bricklin's VisiCalc improved financial record keeping not only by providing users with an easy means of adjusting data in spreadsheets, but also by automatically updating all calculations that were dependent on these adjustments. I'm guessing it's C for now. Okay, so I'm gonna cross out the unnecessary words, right? So we have the subject here, the first computerized spreadsheet, improved record keeping, not only blah blah blah, but also by blah blah blah. Okay, so then this is a complete sentence. And then it says, prior to VisiCalc's release, changing a paper spreadsheet often required redoing the entire sheet by hand, a process that could take days. That's awful. Oh. So he did something like Microsoft Excel. So we have another complete sentence, right? Changing a paper spreadsheet, that's your subject. And then your verb is often required. That's your verb right there. So then this would be C, combining or connecting two independent clauses. Okay. Number 25. Let's see. We want just subject-verb agreement there. So I can just skip to this. The lock would increase. So I see your conditional there, right? Would increase the salinity of the lakes and create, I think this is a parallelism question, a natural water barrier. So let me just go back to the first sentence to make sure I picked the right idea. So we're trying to prevent non-native species from moving freely from these two places. Marine biologist has proposed that a saline lock system be installed. I feel like this is the lock would not only increase the salinity of the lake and create a natural. Yeah, I think this is just these two things go together, right? I was just checking to make sure that we're not shifting onto a new subject. The other option could be C, right? But then you'd remove the and, right? And then be comma creating. So that's your idea of your participial phrase. 26. Despite being cheap, versatile, and easy to produce. This is your dangling modifier again. There are, that's called an expletive, so we're not going to do that. Two problems. No, two problems are not cheap, versatile, and easy to produce. Commercial plastics, two associated problems. Again, this is the subject, right? You have to pay attention. If you have the apostrophe right there, it's no longer the subject. It's kind of like an adjective. So then the correct answer is D. Dangling modifier, very difficult question. Stoma, tiny pores in a leaf that absorb gases needed for plant growth, open when guard cells surround each pore, swell with water. In a pivotal 2007 article, plant cell biologist Yuri Lee showed that this is the title question, I call it, right? When you have the title of the person and their name, the name is essential to understanding. A lot of students will choose D, and they think they can cross this out. But then if you read without the phrase, right, it goes, plant cell biologist showed that lipid molecules. The sentence doesn't flow. It's missing it. There's a million plant cell biologists out there. Don't quote me on that. Maybe it's 100,000. I don't know. But the whole thing is that this is a common question when you have the title and then the name. The name is usually essential. Unless there's like one person in the world who does that, maybe. But this is a general title. Okay, we have another transition word here. So we have small flat structures called spatulae, are found at the tips of the hairs on a spider leg, imagine. I guess they kind of do that kind of spatula thing. These spatulae, plural template, bond with the atoms of the water whenever they touch, blank. As a result, they're able to cling, right? So they form the bonds. And another way of plugging this in is you can try the phrase, that's why spiders are able to cling and climb. So that's how you do 28. Another transition word one, let's see here. So we have November 1934, and she was living in Paris. She was studying firsthand the color-saturated style of the France's modernist masters and beginning to make a name for herself as a painter. Still, I feel like when something is really positive, you want to like veer towards negative. Maybe that's just the skeptic in me. But then if you look at this sentence, right, she longed to return to her childhood home. So then she's like sad. So then still would be the best one, right? Still is showing a transition from positive to negative. And the word is showing contrast, not contradiction, as lots of my students like to say. Another one. Okay, so then we're trying to grant the right to vote, right? So suffrage is the idea of the right to vote. Do not think suffrage means you're suffering. In San Francisco, the Women's Suffrage Party sold equality tea at local fairs. I feel like, and so we're moving from San Francisco, right? Then we're moving to Los Angeles. Yeah. So we're comparing two things of equal size, right? San Francisco, Los Angeles, two large cities. So we're going to either use like similarly or however, right? So for example, is to go from a broad statement, right, into a narrow statement. And in other words, is to restate. And we're not concluding, right? We're just giving two similar examples because they're of equal size. This one I feel is like the most confusing. But anyways, let's see. Okay, so we have a bunch of stuff, right? And then what do we want to do with that stuff? The student wants to compare the lengths of two rail tunnels. Okay, so we want to compare. Some of the worlds, this is not a comparison, this is just a general statement. This is a equal comparison, I like that one. Okay, this is not a comparison, we're not comparing the lengths. Okay, that one's pretty easy, right? We just want two pieces of equal sizes comparing the lengths. So you gotta mention the lengths to compare them. Okay, let's look at this one. So what do we want to do here? The writer wants to provide an explanation and example of fauna. Excuse me. Fauna, what is an example? Plant-animal hybrids. Ooh, interesting. Plant-animal hybrids. I'm thinking of like Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors, maybe. This is, A is just not an example. Okay, there's an example. Parrot with leaves for feathers. That sounds kind of cool. Okay. Subject. Okay. Too short and vague, right? Okay, this one's pretty easy, right? When it says example, you want something you can see, smell, taste, touch. Think of descriptive details, showing, not telling, right? And this is the most descriptive out of the answers. Okay. And last one, let's see. So when researching, blah, 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 they're the notes. Anyway, they want to emphasize the uniqueness. Okay, so something that says it's special or one of a kind, never been seen before. Let's see. Okay, fled to an island doesn't seem particularly unique. This is interesting. This is a little bit more specific. Is still available. I don't know if that's like her accomplishment, right? It's like after she died or something. Only black woman to publish a Civil War memoir. There you go. That's the uniqueness we're looking for, right? So, strangely enough, I feel like this second section was easier than the first section, unless I did something wrong. Does the next section go on into... No, it goes on into math. Huh. So, interesting. I'd be curious to compare how this... to see how this compares to the digital one. I mentioned in the last video that I wanted to go through the adaptive test, but for some reason the College Board app still isn't working yet, so that's why I'm working through the PDF. But I feel fairly confident in this section. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching.